UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military black projects, false flag alien invasion psyop, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join UFO historian Don Ecker, MUFON State Director for New York Chris DePerno, retired veteran pilot Commander Cobra, and well-esteemed host and researcher Martin Willis as they discuss the latest news and topics regarding UAPs with a no-holds-barred approach on UAP Crossfire.
Hello and welcome to the greatest audience on the planet. Welcome to UAP Crossfire on KGB, listen to me, KGRA Radio DB.
KGB.
Bit fired up tonight, folks. A bit fired up. I'm telling you, the pre-show, the warm-up was worthy of being its own show. Look at my two co-hosts. Now, no, before the ugly rumors started, we have not ransomed off Martin. Martin is going to be a little bit late, and Martin has an important catch-up with us when he gets in. He was down in Maryland. South Carolina. He addressed a group of astronomers, and on the very subject we're going to touch tonight. But as always, I'd like to bring out the co-host, Martin Willis, of course, who's not quite here yet. He should be dropping in interdimensionally very, very soon. Chris DePerno up in upstate New York. Don Ecker, our man out on the West Coast, sometimes known as the left coast. He says he doesn't like it out there, but he seems to be pretty happy. Just quick comment. No, we're not going there right now. And, of course, Commander Cobra out of the great territory of Maine.
I like the weather usually.
Very, very hot. There's going to be a lot of raw meat tonight. There's just no doubt about it. These boys are fired up, and I know Martin's going to be fired up when he rolls in on this very quickly. But before we get too far, always a tip of the hat to Bill Skywatcher, who I think was probably taking some kind of pill to relax after he dropped in trying to get us when we were warming up for the show coming up. Wow. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all our folks that celebrate the holiday this weekend. Obviously, I'm in the greater Boston area, so it's a big weekend for those that celebrate St. Patrick's Day. UAP Crossfire had a big week, and we'd like to announce this is the end. This is going to be our last show because the Pentagon came out and told us there's no UFOs, there's no UAPs, there's nothing to see here. Wait a minute, watch the two former police officers on the screen. Nothing to see here, folks. Keep moving along. Just pay your taxes, fund the black programs. Thank you very much for showing up. There's nothing.
Commander, don't you know the government never lies?
Somebody lies. We're going to get to that. Thank you very much, Officer DePerno, for bringing it up, because that's an important point that's going to feature prominently this evening. Another big point, folks, those that are listening on the show. If you would like copies of the articles or copies of, say, Don Ecker's paper, my handle email for this show is Commander Cobra, KGRADB@gmail. If you drop me, and some of you have, we've had some nice conversations, I will send back any of the links to the articles that we're going to be, that we were prepping this week coming into it. So it's been a very big week. Before we dive in, I want to have a quick couple words with each one of the gentlemen. Mr. DePerno, Chris, how was your week? Besides coming down here and reading my notes and trying to unbalance me before the start of the show. The man is an intel mastermind. How was your week?
My week was great, Commander. And listen, I'll tell you, the Buffalo weather has been fantastic. 68 degrees, not a drop of snow on the ground, a little bit of rain. I'm all for climate change, because if this is climate change, I love it.
Satan has moved out of Buffalo. Got it. Got the point. Don
I understand
Ecker,
you got to Colorado.
Decker man, how are you?
I'm here, Commander. I am here. Physically, I am here.
Emotionally?
That's a little touchier. I tried to tell you okay, right before we cut away. But my wife had an optometrist appointment today. So she called me up and she said, "Hey, honey," she said, "you're doing a show tonight. You're not going to be able to cook. I don't feel like it. Why don't I pick up some pizza?" And I said, "Hey, that's a great idea. Where are you going to go?" Well, Pizza Hut has a deal. Okay, buy one, get one free, one topping, blah, blah, blah. I thought I'd stop by there on the way home. I said, "Sure." So she gets back to the house. She walks in, and I can tell by her expression, all did not go well. And I said, "What happened, hon?" She said, "You're not going to believe it." And I said, "Well, I probably will." She said, "I went in there and I ordered the buy one, get one free. And they said, you can't do that, only if you do it online." And I said, "What, they wouldn't do it because you physically came into their store and they wouldn't do that?" "No." So she bought a medium pizza. And I said, "Honey, why did you do that?" She said, "Well," she said, "I was there anyway. And I looked at it. It was a medium pizza, a little thing. Okay. Well, how much did they charge you?" $23. And I said, "Okay, that's it. No more. No more. DiGiorno from here on out. That's it."
I'm a big fan of the Walmart frozen pizzas, and we make them up here.
Well, anyway, that's how I am. So there you
Okay,
go.
well, if you're getting emotionally upset over pizza, I am simpatico with you. I understand the situation. I really do.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, there's nothing like eating cardboard.
That's listen, it's one of the most perfect foods, and when it doesn't go right, and you're really prepared for it. Now, how did her eye visit go? Was that all good?
Oh yeah,
From-
yeah. That was good.
Excellent. Well, speaking of eyes, one last thing. Don, this is a set of glasses you won't be getting, but
Okay.
Chris Soprano, Skywatcher, Martin, who I will probably be doing the show co-located with him next week if all works out. I'll be getting your Eclipse glasses. These are ISO approved, Medical King for the big event that's coming up on the Eclipse. Well, gentlemen,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome in advance. We had a big week, and I'm going to open it up very quickly. Here is my premise. Who's lying? Is Grouch lying? Are the whistleblowers that went in front of Congress and put their hand up and swore and gave testimony? Or is the Pentagon report lying? And is the NASA report, which I just read today, that said, well, I believe that there's life in the universe, but I just don't see anything behind this UAP thing. Now, there's a lot of things in play here. And for the audience, there's a lot of folks that are going to read in on this. We had the Pentagon report, the NASA report that was released. It's in direct conflict with everything we've heard to this point. And I'm going to say, and I will repeat this when Martin is here, and this is no disrespect to previous guests that we've had on the show, but I didn't hear anything out of the Senate today. I didn't hear anything out of the House of Representatives today concerning the conflict in testimony that has been presented and reports that have come out. And I'm curious about that. I want to know why they're not upset that folks have come up, made these statements, and then this part has come out. Now, obviously,
Okay. Before you go anymore, I got to
Go ahead.
say something. This is burning in me, Deuce.
is
burning.
it like the pizza? Is it burning like the pizza, or is this
worse? Much
Oh,
worse.
this is not good.
Okay.
I got some water to put it out.
We got three veterans here. We got Chris Soprano, a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. We got Commander Cobra, a veteran of the Coast Guard, and if I'm not mistaken, Deuce, the Air Force. Is that
That is
correct?
correct. Correct.
Okay. I was U.S. Army. Now, very short, very, very concise story. When I went into the military in '69, I took my test. I scored extremely high. Now, you got to remember what was happening then. The Vietnam War was at its height. Richard Nixon had been elected president, took the office. Okay. Anti-war demonstrations everywhere. The country was in a meltdown. Not quite as bad as today, but it was in a meltdown. I go into the recruiters, and the guy said, well, Mr. Ecker, he said, I've got something here I want to propose to you. And I said, okay. He said, because originally I had signed up, I wanted to be a chopper pilot. That was my initial, that's what I wanted to do. He said, how would you like to go to West Point? And I said, excuse me? He said, yes. He said, the Army has opened this up. He said, we need cadets to go into West Point. He said, basically, this is what you'd be doing. You'd have, now I had already had a year of college. He said there would be 4 years at the academy with a 5-year commitment on active duty. And to be honest, at that time, and this is what I told him, I said, look, I came down to the United States Army to enlist to get away from school. Make a long story short, I turned it down. So the other day, I go up online like I normally do, scanning news reports, and I see one that made my stomach turn, involving West Point. Now, my stepson is a graduate of the military academy at West Point, 1989, okay? So, I mean, I've known guys that have gone to the point. They have deleted from their mission statement the phrase duty, honor, country.
Right.
Okay. And they replaced it with adhering to Army values. Now, what the hell does that mean? So, if you've got an established institution like West Point, over 200 years old, okay, suddenly pulling this in midstream, in the midst of all this American chaos right now, you expect me to believe anything coming from the federal government? Kiss my ass.
Okay, so that's a really nice segue to wish it, Martin, into the show. Good to see you, sir. Glad that you made it up safely from South Carolina. You look refreshed and vibrant, nice color. You really have stepped into the Viper pit tonight, my friend. The pre-show you would have enjoyed immensely if you had heard the just absolute.
No, he wouldn't have.
Yeah, he would have. He would have. He would have appreciated it. This is he was a park ranger. He knows how to handle disgruntled, crazy people in the park, and we were definitely disgruntled, crazy people in the park of ideas. How was your trip up, Martin? Real quick.
Just got in. Everything was fine. It was no trouble on the way up. The way down was a little, long, but the way up, everything went fine, and it gave me It was a good chance for me to read through the entire AARO report, all 45 pages and 8 pages of footnotes. And yeah,
I'm glad you did it because you didn't hear the announcement because you weren't here for the opening of the show. This is our last show because the Pentagon has come out and said there's nothing to UAPs, there's nothing to UFOs. It's all figment of our imagination. Don had somewhat of a expletive kind of reaction to that, but we knew that you would be, wanting to, join us on our very last show because the subject has now been solved. It's all over.
Hey, you know who's flying high? I'm telling you, they're really flying high right now. Stephen Greenstreet and Mick West. They are just ecstatic. So good for them.
Excellent.
I've been telling you since 2018, everybody. See? And then someone remarked below, well, you don't take pilot testimony, but you'll take Kirkpatrick's testimony. Is that what I'm hearing here?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but anyway,
well, we're gonna jump to you in a second because we want to get a field report about how your presentation went down in South Carolina.
Oh yeah,
the audience is interested to hear that. But Chris, where are you on all this today? Besides, lifting the notes.
I have never seen
the show.
I got to tell you something. I have never seen the U.S. government. I can't even say it with a straight face. I can't believe that the U.S. government would ever lie to us. I mean, so obviously, it's true. I'll just read you this. Arrow found no evidence that any USG, that's United States government, investigation, academic sponsored research, or official review panel has confirmed that any sightings of a UAP represented extraterrestrial technology. All investigative efforts on all levels of classification conclude that most sightings were ordinary objects, phenomenon, and the results of misidentification. So we're a bunch of pork chops.
Duty, honor, country.
Yeah, and including other countries. So we're all a bunch of pork chops because one guy says there's no such thing as extraterrestrials, but we got hundreds of people who have seen these things do remarkable things in the air. We've had people who claim, military people, that they've seen them. Commercial airline pilots have seen them. The list goes on. Cops, everybody. And they're all lying because the U.S. government says there's nothing to see.
Okay, so now that Martin is with us, let me propose the point that I want you to ponder before we bring Martin in to get a quick field report, and then we'll dive into this first question I want to throw out to you, gentlemen. Who's lying? Somebody is fibbing. Grouch and the other whistleblowers, or the Pentagon report, Fitzpatrick and other folks that are saying there's nothing to see here. Now, what you missed, Martin, was because we have two sworn law officers, and you were in the park ranger business. I'm sure the three of you are used to saying nothing to see here. Please keep moving along. Okay? That's kind of the impression I want from each of you after we get Martin's take. Where are we? Who's lying? I'm going to say this before we jump into it. I am going to show a couple of my cards. If there was any doubt that Grouch and the rest of the whistleblowers were onto something, all doubt should be removed after this week. You should be able to believe them with 100% certainty that something is afoot. I don't think we're going to get disclosure anytime soon. I think all those things that we've talked about up to this point, but this is a pivotal week because there was a choice. Devil on one shoulder, angel on the other. Uncle Sam, what are you going to do? Pentagon, what are you going to do? Are you going to say this? There's some substance here. There's some things that are here and work it out. Or are you going to go full absolute psycho op and just say, nope, nothing to see here, folks. Who are you going to believe? Your lying eyes or me? The great Groucho Marx lives on. He just happens to be a 4-star flag officer with a group of people working for him now. And there's probably more to that metaphor than we all like to care. But let us take a quick aside. Martin, excited to hear about because we had a little talk before you were going down and you were preparing for this and these reports came out and they had a direct impact on what you were going to do in your presentation. Take us away to South Carolina and what you were up to. Audience is itching to know. Oh man, you got to come off hot mic. We're going to get you a job at the Pentagon if you don't come off hot mic.
You're right about that. Thank you. It was a great audience. I did talk about, and I actually had a little clip from Robert Powell addressing a couple of, the errors and things like that. And also he makes a really good point, which I'll introduce later, but it was a packed house. People stayed all the way to the end. The Q&A was fantastic. It wasn't just astronomers. It was opened up to the community basically down there. So all kinds of people came in and, it was, like I said, they were there right to the end. And also a few people talked about some encounters. One of them involved on Cape Cod driving to Brewster and her car stalled. When the thing came over them, they were kind of chasing it. The thing went out to the ocean, came back. And when it went near their car, all of a sudden a new car stalled. and I love that, and so, but it was really a great interactive audience. I was thrilled. I was so glad that I made it, and at the exact same time, I had a show, pre-recorded show play. So they both started at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, and it went till 9 o'clock, and it was fantastic. And I did bring up the AARO report, and they could have cared less about it. Really, they just wanted to know what I knew about UFOs. They didn't really care what the government said. Like a couple people said, "Oh yeah, it doesn't look too good" and all that. But I addressed it and moved on and had a great discussion. And yeah, it's too bad that as many people weren't paying attention to all the breakthroughs that we've had in this. It seems like a lot of people were paying attention to this report. It seems like it made a lot of news compared to other things. Not maybe not the DC hearing, but it's still. And now, Commander, are you going through and you're going to ask everyone for their opinion on who's lying, that type of thing, and all that?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you want to start off, you can.
Well, reading through the report, I actually buy it 100%. I think it's totally legitimate, and let's move on. So no.
So this is the last show. There it is.
Yeah,
There's the last word and the last show. I don't know what we're going to talk about for the next hour and 30 minutes.
Well, I want to be fair because, reading through it all, I will say that there were a number of things that they said that were important things when it comes to like the nukes and about some of the rumors of the craft being reverse engineered, that they have to gather more detailed information before they comment on it. There were a couple of things like that. So it wasn't all like poo-poo to everything. And I think that's what they should do. They should really investigate it thoroughly. It looks like they did some pretty thorough investigating on some things, but then there was a lot of factual errors. I'm sure you all know that. Dates and things like that, shapes of crafts and things like that. But I will bring up what Robert Powell said because I thought it was a very good point. When you're saying that there's no evidence of extraterrestrials, you need to show what you are basing that on. You can't just say there's no evidence. And it's just, he likened it to like when they're looking for exoplanets. Oh, well, there's dimming of the star as it goes around. So that's how we know it's an exoplanet. He said they're not laying out any what is evidence that there is extraterrestrials or not extraterrestrials. So he says it's not real science. And, I have to agree. That's right. They don't really address any of that. So that's my take overall. It's like I just wish more people would, not, read between the lines and realize this is, how many times has this happened in the past where there is, yes, something's going on. No, there's not. Yes, there is. No, there's not. The back and forth. I guess we're pretty used to it. It's a yo-yo, the UFO yo-yo effect.
You make a very fair point, Martin, about the positive things that are there. What really pisses me off about this report is that they knew when they put the headline out the way they did what this was going to do. And again, there's no explanation of who is in conflict with Congress. This report reflects untold billions that have been spent in the investigation of these craft. There is on the books reverse engineering programs that have been, money has been spent. Taxpayer dollars have gone down this direction. And we're saying, what happened to that? None of this had any validity. There's not even a simple explanation. Now, I get when you do investigations, when you do reports, and you have to present, and there's people downrange. This is about the only modicum I will give any room and maneuver on here, that you have people that are down on the pointy end of the stick engaged with it. But the American people are not the enemy in this discussion. They're we're the folks that are paying the bills for this to go forward with. And that, if you really want to get mercenary on it, this is a big part of my anger in this. Which basically you're doing, it's an expression we used to use in the boat. And Don thinks that I've been dipping into the Sacramento wine here before I started the show, and he's partially correct. It was an extra special day. We're at the government Play-Doh factory before I came to the show tonight, and I have imbibed it just a little bit. It's close to St. Patrick's Day, so I have some excuses to lay here as reasons why I may be in the mood. But we had an expression on the seagoing side services. You're pissing on my back, and you're telling me it's a warm rain. And that's where I am with this right now. This is what's got me kind of fired up about this, because there is no retort and there doesn't seem to be a lot of, we're going to get back to you on this. We've taken money. We've had senators in the past that have spent large sums of money that were disclosed. Skinwalker Ranch was pulled in with the Bigelow Aerospace part of it. And you're telling me all of that, everything that's gone on since we've been doing this, all of this since the National Security Act, it's for naught. Thanks very much. We're on to something new. Chris, your take, please, sir.
Well, I think this report, respectfully, Martin, I think it's full of crap, because I think the thing sets us back 70 years. And the reason being is because I remember what David Grush said, and he said this absolutely many times. He said, I was briefed on what I could say and not say. And the stuff he came out with absolutely said that, you know, we're working on reverse technology. We've got crash retrieval. We got metals. We've got bodies and everything. So this report here really targets a lot of people, because, I mean, if you really see a lot of the highlighted stuff, CIA official allegedly managed a UAP program, and they denounced that. They said the CIA guy is basically lying. Alleged UAP intelligence community document, that's full of crap. Aliens present during DoD technology tests, that's garbage. Claim that a military officer touched an off-world craft. I guess Pendleton and Burroughs are full of crap. You know, here's test off-world technology. Bob Lazar, he's lying his ass off. UAP disclosure study. Interviews claim that between 2004 and 2007, the White House requested Research Institute of Virginia study. Now, I remember Bill Clinton going on the air saying, I want to know about the UAP program, and I went to research that. And Barack Obama also said, well, you know, there's a program, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. So now you have two presidents are full of crap and stuff. And UAP disclosure studies, interviewees name companies allegedly experimenting with alien technology. That's garbage. So I guess Lockheed Martin and all these other companies aren't doing anything. So they highlighted all this stuff for people to see and be able to say there's nothing here and these guys are liars. So they're basically saying Gary Nolan doesn't know what he's talking about. Grush doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, Lou Elizondo doesn't know what he's talking about. And all the other whistleblowers that have come forward, all these expert pilots who have seen stuff that say, hey, listen, I've never seen anything like this before. So it targets them. I agree with what Commander Cobra said. It targets them, so they shut their mouths. So I think we just went back 70 years where we might as well go with the Air Force and say, there's nothing to see here, folks. I don't see anything in this report that gives us any glimmer of hope that we're going to get disclosure.
Don, what do you say, sir?
Okay.
Seatbelts, harnesses, gentlemen.
Two things initially. All right. In my disclosure paper, I talked about the concept of a core secret at the very heart of the UFO conundrum. It is something so sensitive that when it was probably discovered about 1947 or in that time frame, the same time that the powers that be stripped the Army Air Corps away from the Army and made it the U.S. Air Force, the same time that out of the ether came the Central Intelligence Agency, and the exact same time the National Security Act was signed into law. That is when the fix was in. If you don't have a need to know, if you are not on the so-called bigot list, you're never going to know. And this is what I tried to tell Danny Sheehan, okay, when he was on the show a week ago. Now, 57 years ago, in 1967, the University of Colorado accepted the program of the Edward Condon UFO inquiry, now today known as the Condon Committee report. Now, there's a hell of a lot there. It's been, number one, 57 years ago. How many people listening to my voice even know who the hell Edward Condon was? All right. But he was a physicist, had a peripheral job with the Manhattan Project. But in the early 50s, after Dwight Eisenhower became the president and Richard M. Nixon became the vice president, a series of hearings were held in Congress because there was great fear of communist infiltration into the American political process and everything else. Okay? Edward Condon was one of the people called before the committee, and he and Richard Nixon clashed mightily. All right? Condon swung leftwards. Nixon was certainly not there. He was rightwards. And to make a long story short, that's a very touchy, sensitive point in American history. There's so much more I could go on there about, but it was Edward Condon that accepted the Air Force contract. Now, by 1968, everybody was wanting to know what the hell these guys were coming up with. And a few oopses within the Condon Committee happened. One of the committee members found a memo sent by Robert Lowe to some other people. Now, Lowe had been the administrative assistant in there. He may at one point have been a member of the Central Intelligence Agency. I could never find a clear-cut, direct roadway that he had been, but that is highly suspected. Now, we all know that it was the CIA, okay, among others, including the U.S. Air Force, that for years had been trying to put the kibosh on the whole UFO question, okay? But Lowe, this memo explicitly stated that to all the and I'm paraphrasing now, ladies and gentlemen, but to all the outside observers, the trick in this process would to be make them think that we are a bunch of objective but non-believing scientists coming to a conclusion that there's nothing with the UFO thing. Well, among others that got a copy of that memo was Donald Kehoe and NICAP, but he certainly wasn't the only one. Another one was a man by the name of James E. McDonald, which I'll be talking more about down the road. But this caused that damn near process to entirely derail. There was also that year an election, a presidential election, and Richard Nixon ended up winning that election. Well, part of the process of getting this Blue Book thing closed out, the Condon Committee closed out, was to get it done before Nixon took office. Now, why, you might ask? Well, make a long story short, Richard Milhous Nixon had a very long memory. And Richard Milhous Nixon never forgot who was on his enemy list. Condon was one of those people. The fear was, and this is a little behind the scenes baseball, he was a big enough prick that if they didn't have this thing done, okay, he might just reopen the whole thing, if nothing else, to shame Edward Condon. And, hey, by default, the U.S. Air Force. Nixon, incidentally, had been in the Navy during World War II. So, no love lost there. Now we look at today, okay? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We've got another contentious presidential election coming up. This whole UAP thing is big news in some quarters. And I'm looking at what they did at the Condon report as to what just came out of this document. And it's almost a carbon copy replay. All right? Now, look, we know you don't have thousands and thousands of witnesses talking about the same damn thing. All right? Seeing strange things in the sky, performing impossible maneuvers, outflying our fastest jets, making fools out of our naval aviators, all right? Flying into and interfering with nuclear weapons storage, all right? This is something that, well, you just can't brush this away. But what they are counting on, and this has been a truism since day one with UFOs. They're counting on the passage of time because most people, all right, get hooked up in the very next news cycle and they forget this. I mean, hell, you go out and you find a bunch of kids today, all right, in their teens and ask them, why is September 11th, 2001 important? Or, hey, by the way, why are there 50 stars on the American flag? Or, how many stars are on the American flag? Hell, even Barack Obama said 57. Okay, so time passage is one of those things that is basically an enemy. And that's why a show like this, all right, is so important. Because we keep this information fresh and alive and report on what's happening right now.
Don, one quick insert that I want to throw in there. For years, I've heard the legendary story that President Nixon, who was great friends with Jackie Gleason was a huge UFO enthusiast, if not outward researcher. Had a very impressive library, if stories that I have heard are anywhere close to true, and that President Nixon revealed to him the existence of UFOs. You brought up Nixon. I think you're, and we are going to circle back to Dr. McDonald, that's an important part towards the end of the show, so folks need to hang tight for that. What's your thoughts on that, about Nixon, this possible UFO connection?
Two things. Number one, about 25 years ago, back in those days at UFO Magazine, I was doing an exceedingly large amount of television appearances. And I had been called down to MSNBC to do it might have been around the date of the Roswell anniversary, but at any rate, I met one of Jackie Gleason's ex-wives. And she was on there, and the subject, of course, was something to do with the UFO thing. But like I said, I did so many of those damn things, I don't remember exactly what it was. But after the interview, I talked to her, and I asked her about this because I had heard about this. And she said, oh, yeah. She said when Jackie came back to the mothership, now, incidentally, the mothership was what Gleason called his home.
Right.
It was actually built like a flying saucer.
Right.
In New York, okay? So they called it the mothership. She said he bounced off the walls for a couple of weeks. Now, basically, this is the story. Let me stress, this is the story. I wasn't there.
Right.
But Nixon, okay, was down at one, it might have been Homestead Air Force Base down in
Correct.
Florida.
That's how I've heard it.
He had gone by, he and Gleason had been, or were big golfing buddies, huge. And of course, Nixon knew that Gleason had a deep abiding interest in UFOs. So one night he drove by where Gleason was living, went up to the door by himself, no Secret Service guys, nothing. Got Gleason. Gleason was, according to his wife anyway, blown away. They got in the car. Nixon took him to the Air Force Base. They waved him through. The guards, they knew the president, okay, commander-in-chief. He drove to this obscure building, guards everywhere, got out. They went into the building. Gleason said he took him back to a room that had some freezer cases in it. And in the cases were these diminutive bodies of alleged ETs. And he showed them to Jack to let him know you're on the right track. Well, if that's true, and his wife claimed it was, according to Jackie, it just put him into another dimension. Okay. So there you go, Commander. That's about what I know about it.
Well, it's always because your reach back to the history is important. For Wildcat Mahoney, no, we're talking Homestead Air Force Base. This would be long before it was badly damaged in the really bad hurricane. I can't remember. I think Boris was the hurricane. I don't remember which one. And also, Rob UK, you talked about if this doesn't exist, why would they do the Gremlin radar system? It's a very good question. I think the answer, the pat answer you would get out of the Pentagon is, well, that's to track any kind of UAS drone type activity. That's why we do it. And quite honestly, it's just more money to spend as well. I'm not saying that the system doesn't have value, but it does add to conflict. Why, if UAPs don't have any existence as extraterrestrials, I think the answer would come back as, well, we're still curious what these things are because they're most likely an enemy power. So the folks in the chat, whatever reason tonight, I'm not allowed to join you in chat. It's blocking me out. And I saw that Wyatt had put something in there, and I made, you talked about your reaction to Corbell. He doesn't think very highly of Corbell, Don. I think he agrees with you that Corbell was a bit of not a team player, so to speak. So, gentlemen, big week. Who do you, like I said in the opening, I really find that this makes any doubt that it doesn't mean that everything that the whistleblower said is correct, because a lot of times you can be shown things that are a deception to cause you to become an unreliable or to weaken your testimony. That's not uncommon that these things happen, especially if it's organized. What really threw me off in this, and we'll grab this as we're going up to the first break. We're about 10 minutes out from the first break, and I want to get this around the loop. I don't understand the play here. And then what I'm talking about the play is that I think Don lays a very, very convincing case why this came out when it did, how it came out, but not to have any kind of explanation to what has gone before. And we live in a time now where people have no problem saying that previous administrations, previous flag officers, previous whatevers deceived, were deceptive, didn't do things the way they were supposed to, were derelict in their duty. I don't understand how that part is left hanging out, that we have spent untold treasure on this to be told we don't have it and it's not definitive. I don't want to upset people. I believe in climate change. I don't believe in man-made climate change is the driving factor, because the process of the information is flawed. It is you're pulling data that you agree with and you're excluding data that you don't agree with. That's not how the scientific method works. In this process, I don't understand why they did what they did. Don's explanation of timing really resonates. I think it really hits close. Chris, you're kind of nodding. You've got that fatherly, grandfatherly look in your eyes.
I think Don has a part of it, but I think this is, I'll be honest with you, I think this report is because there's a lot of fraud and money. I think that we have seen a lot of money go to different special assets programs that Don has said, and we have seen billions of dollars go unaccounted for. And part of it could be this was more of a cover-up. Now, the closer we get to getting to the truth of this, the closer we're going to get to where this money fraud is going. I tell you, and Don and I have talked about this. We can talk about government operations, and there have been murders because of these government operations. There have been billions of dollars stolen because of these government operations. And I don't think ufology is any different. I think people in private corporations and stuff, there is always an amount of fraud. How much, I don't know. But I truly believe that this part of this, and because of this, is because of money. And people who've gotten a lot of money out of this are become scared of disclosure, because that's the first thing people are going to ask is, well, how much did you spend on reverse engineering? How much did you spend on this technology? How much did you spend on this? And when they can't, remember, the Pentagon cannot account for half their budget. We give them billions of dollars and they say, well, half of it, we don't even know where it went. So I think there's something that is forcing them to do this, to shut this down, because I think we're getting close to somebody maybe going to jail. And that's what I'm thinking. Excellent
point, Chris. I like to say that Jan, spot on in your comments in the chat. The government is too big. It is out of control. And when you lie, the only thing that's going to get you, the truth isn't going to set you free when you're lying at the level these folks are.
Can I just say one more thing, Commander? Because Martin,
all right, let me think about it. Yes, you can.
I just want real quick. I want to just say that Martin brought up about, the government trying to keep things open. And they're smart about this because they say, Arrow interviewed approximately 30 people who have claimed to have insight about alleged U.S. government involvement in off-world technology exploration and possible knowledge of UAP that have allegedly disrupted U.S. nuclear facilities. So they go, well, we really can't take their testimony as it is. We got to have more proof. Now, Commander, Martin, you guys are all smart enough to know that somebody didn't say, well, where are the records? Where's the paper trail? You don't shut down a nuclear facility and not have a paper trail. The U.S. military, you can't go take a crap without a paper trail. So you're telling me there's no paper trail to this? That nobody asked for? Well, where are the documents? Where are the logbooks? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Martin, take us to the break.
Well, a couple of things. We've seen this before. 1952 flap that was major over, Washington, DC for those 3 weekends, and then UFO reports everywhere, and everybody's getting excited. It's like a frenzy. So then they come out, and basically, it was Samson, I think his name was, talks about how a lot of these are hoaxes or naturally explained. But then he does go on to say that some of them are seen by credible people of incredible things, that type of thing. And then he assures the people that they're not, foreign, or it's not the U.S. that is doing it. It's kind of like, and then the Robertson panel comes along, and part of their deal is, debunk everything, and the ridicule factor starts. So they address the hot potato at the time. We have a hot potato in the last couple of years, ever since 2017, and they have to diffuse it. And if the Air Force can't answer exactly what is going on in our skies, it would horrify people. There is something in our skies. If you notice in that report, they didn't talk too much about, yes, there is a real phenomenon happening. They didn't say too much of that. They kind of skipped around that part. But they do agree a real phenomenon is happening. They've said it many times over the years since 1947, the twining and on and on. So what I'm getting at is I think this is just kind of diffusing it, kind of like, okay, everybody, nothing to see here, calm down. You don't need to get Congress involved, and all that. And I think that's what it's all about. That's my general feeling.
Okay, I hear you and I agree, but what I'm not seeing is the lash up that matches that. You're correct. Since 17 and what occurred with Commander Fravor and the battle group, kind of being the rip of the lid coming up a little bit and having this forefront, and he's in my opinion, he's an impeachable witness. I mean, there's nothing you can point to, and then all the subsequent activity around that, the Princeton guys that I interviewed, where folks showed up and all the tapes, all the data was removed. What has me concerned, what's driving me a little bit nuts here, is we're not giving an explanation to what's going on. Now, there has been a couple of these little lines that come out. We don't know. It's not extraterrestrial. We don't know. Which is concerning, because if you're telling me it's not something greater than the sum of what we're dealing with, that means one of our potential enemies has an incredible leverage over us. And countries that are hostile to us right now are convinced everything that's going on over their skies is from us or people that are allied with us. So all they've done, in my mind, is ratchet up the tension level on this, while at the same time not answering what I consider still the big issue at hand. There is nothing in the report that says how they counter what is going on with the people that testified under oath in front of Congress. It doesn't answer why different parts of the Senate and House of Representatives have made this an issue. The Pentagon, which is subservient to that branch of government, subservient to citizens actually, doesn't have an explanation, a clear answer to give to what is possibly being said. And what I'm saying is, you don't have to come out and tell me that these people are lying, but you do need to point out they are in conflict and their conclusions are not the same that we have drawn because of this. And there's not any part of an example. It doesn't match up.
Can I make one other quick point? Yeah. One of the things that Kirkpatrick says in this report basically is that the gimbal most likely is a jet at a distance. And, Mick West has been saying that same thing forever. But one thing they're totally discounting and not even bringing up, if you listen to the recording, look at all of them. Look at all of them. So it's not just a single plane. They were seeing a whole bunch of them. So that's just a flaw that I just realized just a few minutes ago. So I thought I'd bring
It
that up.
wouldn't surprise me. I'm not nearly as convinced on the gimbal, only because it looks like technology to me that would be a swarm of man-made UAS type systems, unmanned aerial systems. But
At that altitude?
oh yeah, and not surprised. And again, I'm obviously fall in the minority in this, but when I look at these things, I look at everything is interconnected. I do not see anything that happens as independent events. One vibration in the pond affects other waves that are coming out, and they join together or they null each other out. And I'm convinced of that across the spectrum, and I'm convinced on that. That's why I was a little bit disappointed that I couldn't get Danny to see that there was a possibility of a trend when we talked with him last week. But we're coming up to a break in 1 minute. Don, take us out for the last minute. Any thoughts as we close out on this part of the show?
Yeah, I think quite basically is that this is a rerun, an absolute rerun of the same dog and pony show we saw with the Condon Committee and the ending of Blue Book. Okay, it just took a few years to get back to it, but here we are, full circle. And hey, look, I mean, anybody with a half ounce of gray matter between their ears knows there's something going on here, a hell of a lot bigger than what these guys at the Pentagon are trying to tamp down. It just ain't going to wash, fellas.
UAP Crossfire, we're at our break. Please stay with us for the second half of the show. And thank you to the greatest audience on the planet. And thank you for your comments in the chat. We will be reading those and discussing it. See you on the flip side. Welcome back to UAP Crossfire with my co-hosts Chris DePrano Martin and Don Ecker. I want to jump right in to a quick remark that was put to me directly. Why I, someone who's served in the military, have such distrust of the government. How could I? They seem to think that I'm in conflict. That would be Mr. Avery and William Runner. So, yeah, I do have a great deal of problem with it because, number one, I took an oath to the Constitution, and I don't believe we're following the Constitution. There's lots of talk about democracy. We're not in a democracy. We have a constitutional republic. Democracy says that the majority rules. A constitutional republic says you follow a set of rules. The Constitution set out limits on the government, and the government is encroaching on my liberty. That's number one. Number two, I put the uniform on because there was nothing more important to me in my formative years and growing up than to be a military aviator. I have been blessed with some of the greatest opportunities because of this, what this country is. I love this country, and I still put my heart and soul into it. I work as a contractor for the Department of Defense, traveling to wonderful parts of the world where people are something less than excited to see U.S. personnel at, because I want to stand with the folks that are still on the pointy end of the stick. When I test aircraft, and I still do some of that kind of work now, or test systems, that's what I'm about. So I don't do it because I dislike the government. I stand here because, A, I believe in the Constitution, and I don't like things that are happening. And this is one of many issues. How this UAP, UFO, how this event is gone. And if anybody has heard me speak in the past or in shows, there are areas where I will never disclose what goes on. And there's other areas where I will have you in tears of laughter of the foolishness that went on. My playbook until the Cold War was over was very much Mad Magazine spy versus spy. It was all great fun, and we're all running around doing that, but we believed in what we're doing. But it's for the folks that are still in uniform. That's really where it comes down to. So hopefully I'm making it clear to everyone to understand why I am in the mood that I'm at. We have billions of dollars that are going into many directions, but we do not have enough people flying hours. We have ships that are not able to go to sea. We do not have enough people making quota to join the military because they're concerned about what's going on. There's countless issues. And just because I abrogated some of my civil rights when I put the uniform on, I am no longer in uniform. So now I have a more free speech program to present why I am very upset when the government, which is a reflection of us, simply that, is not in check. That is the big difference. Hopefully I've made sense. You guys all know, if you ever want to go one-on-one with me and you want more detail, be more than happy for folks to contact me, Commander Cobra, written out, kgradb@gmail, and I'll gladly answer. Do you believe they would test top secret aircraft in general training areas? Yes. That has happened, Wildcat. Sometimes it's by accident. Sometimes it's on assessment. I'm in the minority with a lot of, especially with some of the hosts, but I am convinced that Tic Tac was our technology. Where it came from, I'm not certain on, and it was purposely brought into. Yeah, Martin disagrees, but it was purposely brought to assess and to see how it would work against a battle group in a situation where they were preparing to go on a deployment. And it was a fairly safe, exception for the possibility of a midair. It was very safe because the weapons were held back. They're not carrying weapons, not carrying live rounds when they do that because of the fact that they're in a training scenario. So that happens. And there are other places where things have gone awry. Experimentation with troops and LSD, and the troops didn't know what they were being given to see if they could make better soldiers and better activity. The release of bio-type weapons to see how they would go through in urban areas. And that was actually done on civilian populace in large parts of the United States, large urban areas, to see how communicable diseases would move. This was in the 70s, 60s and 70s. So we do these things. That's precisely why I get pissed off and you hear anger in my voice when the government gets out of check and does this, or simply says we have spent billions that we can't properly account for, and we have nothing to show for it. And on top of that, you have no right to ask us. Bullshit. Chris, I'll throw it to you.
I'm kind of curious at one thing that they said here, and I'd like to get everybody's opinion about this. They go, one named program was a UAP-related prospective special access program called Kona Blue that was proposed to the Department of Homeland Security. Now, I will tell you, Department of Homeland Security are not intelligence officers. They don't do intelligence work. What they do is they refer it to the FBI. So that's kind of interesting is what they're saying there. Supported by individuals who believe the U.S. government was hiding off-world technology, the program was never approved by DHS, and its supporters never provided evidence to support their claims. Now, in 2021, without sufficient justification, the scope of an IC-controlled access program was expanded to protect UAP reverse engineering. This program never recovered or reverse engineered any UAP or extraterrestrial spacecraft. This IC program was disestablished due to the lack of merit. Now, wait a minute. They kind of contradict themselves in this statement because you wouldn't make a program. You won't make a program unless you got something there. You don't ask for logistics.
So Chris, let me give you what the cover is going to be on this. Here's the cover. We have reverse engineering programs for other countries' technology as they have it for us. When we recover stuff from a battlefield, when we get an aircraft, when someone defects, computers, weapons, there are reverse engineering programs. That's going to be the answer they're going to try to explain here. It doesn't
What they say in this report, though, doesn't make sense, though, Commander.
No, I agree with you.
And this is where I think money's involved because I see this and I go, oh, wait a minute, you've been reverse engineering all this other stuff. You're talking about this. Now all of a sudden it doesn't exist. That they contradict themselves, but they contradict themselves a lot in these reports.
Martin, you're approaching the screen. What do you got?
I was just relaxing. One of the good points that, again, Robert Powell said when I interviewed him quickly the other day was that, what was it, July 2022, Arrow was formed. I believe it had a different name at that time, but I can't remember. The names just seem to keep changing on everything. But he said, so the 18 months, he's been researching deeply in a scientific manner the UFO problem for 17 years. A lot of people he knows, like Don's been looking at it for 35 years, whatever. A lot of people have been looking at it, fairly deeply and dedicating a lot of hours. So they come out with this report after looking at it for 18 months. And how can you get anywhere in such a short time, really? I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And also, the people that were involved, there weren't really, I don't know exactly how many people were involved in this. They did gather a lot of information. It doesn't seem like a lot of really deep information to me, though. It just seems like it was put together. I'd be really interested to see what Volume 2 comes out as, but I can almost guarantee you that it's going to be another headline that's going to diminish the whole situation. But we'll see. And
what is your reasoning behind that, Martin? Why do you think they want to diminish it? I want to get your idea, because your opinions are very important. So what is your idea why they're trying to diminish it after all these whistleblowers have come out?
I just think it, like I said, before, it's a hot potato right now, and it's like there's a lot of there's a lot of people like trying to get to the bottom of it, and if they can't explain exactly what these things are, because I don't think they know the full picture. I don't think anybody does, and I just think that they feel it's a threat because the Air Force can't say that it can protect our skies, or the Navy or anyone else in the sky can protect us. So this is why I think that I don't think we're going to have disclosure easily at all. Maybe what I've heard the term forced disclosure possibly, but I don't think that they can't explain. I mean, all right, say all of a sudden they said, okay, this has been happening. We really do think this and that and all that stuff. They have a lot of splaining to do, for all the lies they have told previously.
But 1 out of 3 people believe in UFOs right now. I mean, why is this? We've already called them a threat. Admirals, everybody else have called them a threat. Why is it so scary now? All of a sudden now, today, it's so scary when this has been going on for years. I'm sorry to cut you off, Commander.
No. You're making a really good point.
I just think that it seems like it's coming right to the surface. You have Congress involved. You have the Senate involved, and this bipartisan push to get to the answer. They've never had that before. So it's like really, it's like a dangerous point, a tipping point, I think. And I think that's why all this is happening. I think that's why that came out the way it did.
So let me use this metaphor on you both, all of you. Tyrants like to ride around on tigers. And right now, I think the entire American populace is very much the tiger. And tyrants enjoy riding around on tigers because it gives them a lot of power. But they're also very fearful that if they ever get off the tiger, it's going to eat them. And I think we are in that situation now. There's so many things going on in parallel to this particular discussion. I mean, I can give you a case in point, a spectacular argument on why I am not for this hugely popular bill to shut down TikTok. I don't like TikTok. I don't use it. I have nothing to do with it. I think it is a very bad thing from the Communist Chinese Party. Bad. But I also was around when we came around with the Patriot Act. And I was in uniform when the Patriot Act came out. And I had people telling me, hey, if you don't do anything wrong, what are you worried about? What am I worried about? This goes against the Constitution in all respects. And what happens when someone decides that now something that wasn't wrong is wrong because they sit in the majority of power and they just assign it?
For example, saying there are only two genders, which have been true for all of human history.
Or
until
what
the
happens,
last 10 or 15 years.
And Don, what happens now when you say the Pentagon's come out and said there are no UAPs, and anyone who engages in social media in programs like this that have a counterpart are a threat to the good order and keeping of this country and are holding the country back? Couldn't happen, right? North of the border where we all sit, hate speech not defined is now punishable by going to jail for 5 years to life.
What did King Leonidas of the city-state of Sparta tell the Persian envoy when the Persian demanded he hand over his weapons?
What's for dinner?
Come and get them.
So, Don, go ahead, Chris.
I just want to say the point that what you said, Commander. There was at a congressional hearing where a congressman turned around and said, people who give false information on UAPs should be held accountable on a misdemeanor.
That's correct.
That's kind of scary.
Representatives who were downstairs in the congressional subway. Remember when they had the interview when we played it a few shows back, and they were talking about that's when interdimensionality was the word of the week. Everything was interdimensional, interdimensional. And Grouch had the private behind closed doors session, and they all came out, and they were convinced there's something to this. Somebody's lying. Somebody's committed at least a misdemeanor.
Did we see anything in that? I didn't notice anything in that report about interdimensional.
Nope.
I don't think. They just focused on extraterrestrial and non-human intelligence.
So is that telling us something, Martin?
What's that?
Is that telling us something? Maybe they're pulling a wool over our eyes and saying maybe it's not extraterrestrial, maybe it's interdimensional, but we're not going to talk about that.
Well, there's something else to look at. Now, back in the 60s, all right, it was just we Americans in the Soviet Union that were striving to get to outer space, to get to the moon, okay? Just the two of us, the Russians and us. Today, 55, 6, 7, 8 years later, it's a whole different ballgame. The Japanese, the Indians, the Chinese, okay, the former Soviets, the Russians, us. A lot of them went to the moon. Now, for you guys that are aware that I had over 20 really long years in researching lunar phenomenon. Hey, I'll be very upfront. I believe personally, this is just me, okay, that there is at least an extraterrestrial presence on the far side of the moon, the side we never see. But the Chinese went there. The Russians, even the Israelis are sending up spaceships. None of them have given us any photographs of anything strange. None of them have talked about seeing anything strange. Hell, even Buzz Aldrin on the original trip on Apollo 11 talked about being trailed by an unidentified flying object while they were going to the moon. Hell, they made a movie out of it. Okay? Now, isn't it strange that none of these other countries, and a lot of them are not friends of ours, would not have said something that would put all this American government stuff to rest? No, not really. because I am convinced, and I'm certainly not the only one, that among the very upper top echelon of governments around the world, at least ones that can get out there, have probably an informal, if not an officially formal, agreement to keep quiet about this. What do you gentlemen say?
I think you're right, Don.
Let's face it, Don, we're all here because we believe in extraterrestrials. And so do we believe that there could be bases on the moon? Yeah, you're absolutely right. There probably is. There's probably bases, extraterrestrial bases on a lot of planets. There's probably our own ships up there. Because remember, the Germans developed fission technology in 1938. They were able to split the atom. Two physicists, and a woman who's a chemist. They were able to split the atom in 1938. So they had the idea of making atomic work. So I cannot believe since 1938 until 1980, we didn't develop that. So we know about fusion technology because they're starting to come out with it now. Well, if they came out with it now, we probably had it years ago, and we've developed, crafts that probably can do amazing things. And I agree with Commander. I think the Tic Tac is ours. I think we do have ships that can go to all around the universe. So, yeah. Is there bases there? We probably have a base there. I can't.
I'm sure you're right, but one must be very, very careful of the disinformation that suffuses this entire field. I read an article the other day that proposed that currently, right now, at least the United States government, perhaps a consortium of governments, have 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 interstellar ships currently in service, at least in this solar system.
Possibility.
Now, you're talking about billions and billions I sound like Carl Sagan, billions and billions of dollars that have disappeared. Could this, in fact, be part of it? That secret space program that people have hypothesized and theorized about for a long time. Do you consider it conceivable that that could be true, or just more muddy water to stir up the pond?
It might be a little bit of both, in my opinion. And one of the reasons that I come to the conclusion that I come to why we haven't accepted the advances, high costs set aside for a moment, the folks that are making money now are happy to continue with that system, and they're not ready to give that up. We have wars going on that no one wants to stop or try to stop the bloodshed. We are running economies by throwing more money, some of it which we really don't have, by printing it up under some pretty crazy economics to go forward on this, because it keeps the merry-go-round going.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think the technology is out there to live a much better life for the entire planet than we have right now. This is what I'll go back to the climate change part. If you're telling me that what you're saying is true and I have to accept it, I'm not allowed to question your reasoning and what you're presenting. Where obviously that burr is very deep in my backside on my saddle on this part. Then why are we allowing some countries to go absolutely reckless? Why are we allowing that? Why are we allowing them to go further? Why don't we just say, look,
India, China
and India are good examples. Why don't we say, okay, look, We were really, really bad. Western civilization is bad. Everything we've done is bad. But how we're going to fix it is we're going to make sure that the cleanest, most efficient power that we can come up with, fusion or fission. Obviously, fusion is close at hand. You countries will get that breakthrough technology. You've got the largest populations. We're going to go move forward. Very Pollyanna statement. But we have a huge military might, and you must cut back, because if you don't, Armageddon is upon us. This is going to happen. This is my biggest problem that I have with the government and self-appointed bettors telling me this is how it is. And the same thing happens in the UAP world of investigation. Self-appointed bettors, I cannot check their work. I can't look at their figures. And I am told, you just accept it. It's the way it is.
Sure.
I'm not going to. Sorry.
Scientific. Okay.
By
sure.
the way, speaking of Armageddon, I haven't heard anybody mention that Vladimir Putin has once again drawn out the nuclear saber, and he's been waving this thing around. Now, question. Let me ask a question. Who here among the four of us believe that maniac would be tempted to actually use it?
Oh, I think he's tempted to use it. And I think the reason he's saying it is, if the types of weapons that are being sent to the Ukrainians continue to press deeper into Russia, and it's going to cause him to have internal strife. It's going to cause him to have problems within the confines of Russia. He's letting folks know, I'm going to make this stop by using the best tool that I have. And I am not ever going to defend Putin. I thought this guy was a shitbag back in the days when people were looking into his eyes and could see his soul, and all this other crap that has come out of every administration since that has replaced Reagan. Reagan's the only guy that took these assholes to the wall, and now this is what we've ended up with this nonsense that's gone on. We're going, wait till after the election, I'll be able to work with Vladimir, and Vladimir wasn't even the sitting president at the time. Hot mic off Obama. Bush with his nonsense of meeting with him and looking into his eyes and all this horseshit, all of it. Absolute horseshit. But this guy, you corner
them sons of bitches.
You corner a crazy rat like this, and you've blown up Nord Stream, the pipeline, the gas pipeline in there, and our fingerprints are all over that. This is what you end up with when you put them into that kind of a corner.
I want to pivot just a little. You brought something up, Don, that I want to about atomic energy. It says in the report here, and this is so confusing. Along with these conventional technology research areas, the U.S. government started the Manhattan Project in 1942. This program operated in secrecy and led to the establishment of several secret cities across the United States to support the development of the nuclear bomb. So any misunderstanding stemming from the intense secrecy surrounding this and similar programs could have been misconstrued for other efforts, meaning UFOs. How can you equate an atomic bomb to a UFO? I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because it just clicked. You got an atomic bomb that takes out a city, and you got a UFO flying around. Where is the correlation to the two? I don't get this.
I think
Martin, can you help me with that?
I think the metaphor or the attempt that's trying to be put there with the illusion is we have lots of things that have gone on in the secret for your betterment, for your safety, and you need to trust us. And sometimes you see things like a bunch of military vehicles going down the road, and you guys are crazies for asking the question, what's going on?
Yeah, I think this whole report is crazy. That's my opinion of it.
Well, I
They
know.
even insult J. Allen Hynek. J. Allen Hynek turned around and says, "Hey, there's something to this project." But if you look in the report, they said that the UFO was purposely, and J. Allen Hynek were supposed
Chris,
to debunk everything.
You're going back to my original point. Who lied?
Exactly.
I'm not going to ask you who's going to be held accountable because we don't hold anybody accountable anymore. I'm not even going to insult you guys and the audience that someone's actually going to be held accountable. Yes, I think this is a direct shot at the whistleblowers to try to knock down what they have said, what's been entered in congressional record, to really put a peg against their testimony, their participation in the process. Martin, you look like you're ready to say something. Come on, boss.
Oh, well, okay. Here's Mario Woods. Now, Mario Woods was in the Air Force security, and he was at Ellsworth, South Dakota.
Correct.
He had a UFO came over missile site November 5, and they didn't know what the alarms went off. So he went out there with another security member to see why the alarms were going off. And this thing looked like the sun, as big as the sun. It was sitting over the missile site. He looks over to the guy driving the truck, and he's frozen on the wheel, just sitting there like this. So he's like trying to get his attention or whatever, and he's just looking straight ahead, frozen. And so then he sees beings coming up to the car. Last thing he remembers, next thing, he wakes up, he sees a wall. He's outside in the mud, laying on his back, looking up at the wall of a dam. He's 14 miles away. He has no idea. They were looking for him all night. Has no idea how he got there. He testified about that for 4 hours and 19 minutes to AARO. He and I become, we talk a lot. He's a great guy. So he testified, and I kept looking in the report to find anything about his testimony. And the one thing that it keeps coming back to the report, they will mention this about a nuclear site, that about a nuclear site, and they'll say, but we don't have any corroborating data or something like that.
Where's the paper trail?
There has to be corroborating data to his situation. He was debriefed. There was someone strange showed up, and all that type of stuff. But I believe his story. I don't think there's anything that he's embellished about that. He gets emotional talking about it. He's not, it really affected him.
It's a form of PTSD. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I can't say that everything that people say, how they conclude, is accurate, but I'm not saying what they didn't experience didn't happen. That's what drives me nuts when we don't have any paperwork on it. You look at what went on with the Rendlesham and the kinds of things that went on with people involved with that to get things squared away. These are all, some of them remain career people. Immediately get short notice orders to Korea where the press can't easily get to them because Korea is not a country that easily allows them to get to a military site. This just happened. And when you draw those 2 points, you're commander, come on. You're putting too much together. You're stringing things together. No, this just doesn't happen unless there's a reason to make these things happen.
Where's the paper trail? You don't have an incident like that without something being put in a logbook or some kind of debriefing notes. And there's nothing in the report where they said, hey, this guy, whether he was telling the truth or not, which I believe he probably was telling the truth. Right. But they never said, we went to go find a paper trail, which is investigation 101.
Right. And Chris, how about when it finally does come out, it's redacted? Everything but the title page to the yours sincerely, and everything else between it is redacted out.
So that's
there you go. There's your files. There's your FOIA. There you go. All right. Before we get too far down the line, and we're working up, Don, you got to let's get into this. What we're going to be going after for the next couple of weeks, because you opened up with it on the show. Dr. McDonald the Condon Committee, and what's old is new again?
Well, James E. McDonald is a name that today is, especially among the newer people taking part in UFO, UAP studies, is a name that's probably not known at all. In the 60s, James McDonald was a true force to be reckoned with. He was an atmospheric physicist out of the University of Arizona. For whatever reason, he took an interest in the UFO phenomena. Okay, now at that time, there were organizations like NICAP, National Investigative Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, that in those days was headed up by Donald Keyhoe. Now, Donald Keyhoe was a graduate of the Naval Academy, okay, entered the United States Marine Corps, became an aviator, and he was leading one of the very first squadrons of Marine aviators into Guam when he was involved in an air crash of some type, and he ended up being medically retired. This was in the very early 30s. Well, he then started writing professionally on topics of aviation. In 1946, 47, with what was happening in the skies above Europe, the Foo Fighters, then the Ghost rockets, then Kenneth Arnold's sighting of something near Mount Rainier on June 24th, 47, and a few days later, the infamous Roswell event happened. Keyhoe sat up and took notice. Now, because of his military background, Keyhoe began interfacing with a lot of his academy classmates and classmates from other military organizations like West Point. Now, Keyhoe was personal friends with Roscoe Hillenkotter. Now, if that's a name you're not familiar with, he was the first director of CIA, Central Intelligence. Hillenkotter ended up sitting on the board of NICAP. Well, they were making a lot of fuss about getting congressional investigations in the 60s. And then James McDonald popped, figuratively speaking, out of the woodwork. Began going around speaking to professional groups and what have you. And it was basically, he took on people like Donald Menzel, who was the head skunk at the garden party for skeptics. He was a Harvard astronomer. The guy had incidentally been involved with intelligence matters during the Second World War. That's something they kept pretty well hushed up, okay, which told me the fix was in with Menzel from the get-go. And people like Philip Klass, all right, that's when he began his work with the idea to supersede Menzel as Menzel was growing older. Now, McDonald had been a naval cryptologist during the Second World War and often did jobs kind of like Commander Cobra as a civilian consultant for the Navy. And he became such a thorn in the side of officialdom that he ultimately ended up was targeted. Now, I've got a lot of information about McDonald. He unfortunately, and I don't want to give away too much before the show, but he unfortunately ended up committing suicide in 1971. It was incidentally his second attempt at suicide. Now, I did a lot of research on that. I knew personally Ann Druffel, who wrote a book on McDonald.
Firestorm. Yeah.
Firestorm, that's correct. Who wrote a book on McDonald. And McDonald was in many ways a tragic story. But the man did some monumental research and investigations in this. Currently, down in the University of Arizona, all his files are down there, including recordings that McDonald made, okay, during the course of his research, with hundreds and hundreds of witnesses, all types of cases, everything from military base encounters to other things. But you can't get to them. They will perhaps, if you call ahead, let them know that you'd like to come down and review some of this. They've got to vet you for whatever reason, okay? But they won't just let anybody come in and see it or get it. I mean, Jesus, the guy's been dead since 1971. What the hell is the big secret? And a buddy of mine, a friend of mine by the name of Wolf McCarran, was the sound and audio guy that actually took all these recordings and transferred them into digital. I mean, hell, they're just sitting there in digital format right now. But we're going to have a lot to talk about McDonald. He had some other things going on. I've got to be careful. I know some items about his domestic situation, although I'm sure his former wife is probably now deceased, and he's been dead for years. So, yeah, but there were some squirrely things there. But to just give you one hint of the dirty tricks that some of these sons of bitches pulled on McDonald. McDonald was sent by the Navy down to Australia on some type of operation, kind of like Commander Cobra recently did in the Middle East. And when he got down there, he, of course, at that time was very well known in the media. Some Australian television stations got in touch with him and interviewed him on camera. And he did one or two radio programs down there. Well, Phil Klass, we all remember Philip Klass, right? Senior editor, Aviation Week, Space Technology, backstabbing little shitheel that he was. And I, by the way, saved his sorry ass from getting pummeled at the Pensacola MUFON Symposium in 1990 by pushing a 250-pound drunk away from him. Klass was a short little guy, and he was in his 60s then. And then I shamed Phil into buying me a bourbon and water. Okay, I said, Phil, I just saved your ass. You ought to at least buy me a drink. And he did.
Top shelf, I hope.
Yeah. But anyway, he wrote the Navy a letter accusing, and by the way, Klass did the same thing to Stanton Friedman.
Correct.
When Friedman was moving up to Canada, claiming that he was down in Australia doing his private UFO research on the Navy's dime, okay, which caused a lot of problems for him. So, I mean, there were some dirty deeds being carried out on him then, and it kind of puts you in mind of what's happened recently, according to Grush, his wife being threatened and so forth. And as a matter of fact, the other day, when Chris and we were having a private conversation, and I was telling him about this idea about Jim McDonald, and he said, well, I'm not going to tell your story, Chris. I don't know how much you can even go public with it. But a certain female that was threatened and attacked at a UFO.
Yeah,
I don't know.
No,
okay.
I can't.
All right. I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
that's fine. Don't worry about it. But there's a lot of strange things that are happening in ufology now, happening that I'm aware of certain things that I just can't talk about right now because I'm involved with it. But yeah, I could tell you that, you know, we talked about Grush saying how people were murdered and stuff like that. Well, after digging into his statement, people have been threatened. People have been physically assaulted in the ufology field by people of unknown, and I was kind of shocked because I didn't didn't quite believe it, or I was hesitant to think that that was a thing. But after digging into it, I found out that some of that stuff is extremely credible.
Chris, can you talk at all about what we talked about this week and some of the things that you're delving into in this latest investigative process you've started?
Well, the one thing that I can talk about, and I talked about it with Don, is what they call the octopus murders.
Yeah,
Don
I didn't
is
want to say
actually
it unless
familiar
you were
with that.
ready to talk about
Yeah, but I mean, I'm doing a lot of research because, and I think Don's theory is correct that there's a UFO containment to the octopus murders, and that includes government cover-up, government illegally doing things, government lying, government using land to fund they made casinos and they made cigarette shops on Indian reservations to steal the money from the Native Americans in order to use it for black projects. And there's a whole documentary on it, and I was shocked. I'm trying to reach out to some of the detectives that worked on this, and after talking to Don says, you know what, Chris, there's a UFO containment to this, and maybe Don should explain that better because I didn't know until Don told me.
Real quick, before you guys jump in, Mr. Bigfoot has just put a very important question into the chat that I just need to take a quick 30 seconds. Martin is supposed to ask me this. Martin, you didn't read it. So Popeye was a Coast Guardsman before he was a sailor. I will provide proof of this. I will provide documented evidence. I will do it by email. Bigfoot, just drop me an email. I'll be glad to send you all the links that prove this. Or you can be in line with Mac Maloney, who longtime friend who likes to play with me every now and then and tell me that he was a sailor just to spin me up. But I took my blood pressure medicine, and since Martin always gets the cool points for being so cool with the dark lighting, won't they be surprised next week, Martin, what's going to happen next week? But we don't want to give that away. We'll let next week unfold as next week unfolds. But Mr. Bigfoot, he was a Coast Guardsman. God bless the United States and the United States Coast Guard, a line that was uttered in one of his first cartoons.
Do you know what they used to be called before they called Coast Guard?
The Cutter Revenue Service or the Light Boat Service?
The Coast Guard.
Oh, the Hooligan Navy?
No.
Puddle pilots? What?
The lifesavers.
What?
Lifesaver.
Hey,
Yeah,
please don't make fun of the Coast Guard. They always took fighting.
Oh, my dad was in the Coast Guard
wherever they had to go.
So there was the Lighthouse Service, there was the Lifeboat Service, and the Cutter Revenue Service, and they were all and the Steamboat Inspection Service. They were all joined together, 1923, to form the United States Coast Guard under that one name.
I'm going to tell you guys a real touching story. It'll be really nice. We need it tonight. My dad was on a rock on a lighthouse. He was lonely, and he got very lonely, and he called the operator just for someone to talk to. And that's my mother.
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah,
I fell in love and got married, had babies. Yep.
And you were one of the babies.
I'm one of the babies. Yeah.
Well, that's at least the cover story. That's at least the cover story, because have been some people in the past that thought you might be, extraterrestrial origin.
Well, yeah.
There's that.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to the murders.
Yes, we're back to the murders. We've had a touching story. We've taken care of the story and Popeye the Sailor Man being a Coast Guardsman, and now we're back to murder.
And we're going to get back to nukes and Russian nuking us and all that. So I just wanted to put something soft in there tonight. Yeah.
I wanted the UFO connection with the murders because I mean that's something that Don has firsthand knowledge about.
Well,
There was a lot of denial in that report about that.
a few days ago, probably sometime this past week, my wife's taste in evening television entertainment is different than mine. So we have a television in the bedroom and we have one out here in the living room. So I didn't have the living room TV on, and I was wandering down to my office, and all of a sudden I heard this voice coming from her TV, and I popped my head in, and I said, "Honey, what are you watching?" And she said, "Oh my God, you gotta see this. Excuse me, you gotta see this." And I said, "What is it?" She said, "It's about the octopus murders." And I said, "Oh my God." We at UFO Magazine, when that was going on, were in the absolute middle of it. I was doing a major expose on the Wackenhut Security Corporation, who
Interesting group of folks.
at that time was providing security for Area 51. Okay. The Bob Lazar story was still huge at that time. And people going out to basically, see what was going on. As a matter of fact, because of all the work we did on that story, and I'm going to tell you something about some of the players, but all the work that we did on that story, okay, led to what the hell was the movie company when they were making Area ID4 Independence Day, 95, 96. We ended up doing a cover story on that. Everybody's seen that movie, right? And the original ID4. Huge movie. We were invited to be featured, Vicki and I were invited to be featured speakers at the dedication of Highway 375 to the ET Highway that runs past Area 51. But that I got a lot of pictures of that. That's a story for another day. But anyway, so all this is going on. I'm doing some real in-depth research. I knew several Native Americans that lived out at Cabazon. Okay. Matter of fact, they'd come over to our UFO magazine offices. We were doing a lot of in-depth stuff. I came across several names that I started doing some research on. Now, one of the names was a guy by the name of Robert Booth Nichols. Now, Nichols was a very shady guy. And on one of the stories that I had been involved in with hard copy, okay, the producer, I knew the producer, guy by the name of Dean Vallis. I knew him very well. And Dean heard me mention this guy's name to somebody. And he pulled me aside. He said, "Hey," he said, "what do you got to do with that guy?" And I told him what we were working on. He said, "Hey, Don," he said, "be very, very careful." And I said, "Okay, what are you talking about?" Because, I was still all toxic masculine and all that kind of crap, right? He said, "Well, the story is that guy kills people." Oh, okay. All right. And of course, the main crux of the whole octopus thing was and he was whacked, he was murdered, Danny Casolaro. Okay. There were other people that got involved in the octopus situation. One of them was Jim Keith, who was, Jim, unfortunately, now is no longer with us. He's deceased. But he did a book on the octopus that we also have a copy of here. But this was a very, very shady thing. And it also involved a major computer company and a type of software You look it up online. It was called Promise Software, which was an intelligence coup for somebody because the data and type of computer works that they were using this for, okay, had been designed supposedly by the NSA with a back door that anybody could go in and compromise all your files, everything. All right. So there were a hell of a lot of things that encompassed this. And when you talk about an octopus, this damn whole thing would have taken probably a crack team of 50 or 100 investigators to track down all of this. And what we managed to finally pull out at UFO Magazine, in many ways, I regard as a miracle, because that damn thing just took us over for months and months and months. And it was one of those cases where, well, this is also, and I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but we were being surveilled, okay? They were surveilling us at UFO Magazine. My radio show then was being surveilled. The guests that I had on, one of them was involved in some way with these intelligence groups. That night that I had this guy on, we found people surveilling us out in the parking lot. The guy was sitting in, if you can believe this, a Ford Pinto, nondescript car, right? But he had like a half a dozen antennas on the top of his damn roof. And some of the people went over that were in my entourage, went over and surrounded his car and looked in. He had a huge 35 millimeter camera, all right, sitting on the seat beside him. He was taking notes, all right. He had a two-way radio of some kind. It was
Don.
a,
I think the
clown
safe
show.
explanation there is, Don, if you're going to be an avid amateur photographer and amateur radio enthusiast, you can and have all that gear, you could only afford a Pinto.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I think that's the safe conclusion to draw there. Just remember, just because you are paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you.
That's right. That's right.
And you don't want the Pinto to get rear-ended.
Never.
No, you don't. You don't.
No.
It turned out this guy was a private investigator. And when I tell you who hired him, okay, I'm sure you won't be shocked. At the time, his license was out of date. Okay. I did a little checking through friends of mine, but he was hired by Lockheed, if you can believe that.
Wow.
To come down and watch us.
A cutout, huh? I'm shocked. I'm Lieutenant Cedron in Casablanca. Shocked to find out there's gambling going on in that casino.
And probably hookers, too.
Hookers.
Wow, what a way to end the show.
The lighthouse, happy lighthouse story has been enveloped in the dark fog around the lighthouse.
That's
Someone
right.
get on the phone and call the operator. We need the love connection. All right, gentlemen, we are pretty much up against it. We got about 30 seconds. Chris, Martin, Don, as always, my deep thanks for this week and preparing for the show and the phone calls and emails. As always, we're going to be to the greatest audience on the planet. Please join us over the next couple of weeks. We're going to dive deeper into the Dr. James McDonald story. There's a lot more to come on that. Don Ecker's going to be taking point on that because he has some great stuff. And this is a tragic but heroic story that needs to get some light cast upon it. And as always, I would like to wish a happy and very fun St. Patrick's Day to all the folks that do celebrate and partake and support it. And as always, as I like to pass out, many thanks to Skywatcher, our producer, who somehow manages to keep this band of bandits together and pointed in the right direction to get together for the show. Thank you all. God's peace that surpasses all understanding and knowledge. Next week, UAP Crossfire out.